What does it take to control the future of capitalism? Not an army, not a trillion-dollar balance sheet, not even political office. Just one man, a man most people have never voted for, but whose ideas shape everything from trade agreements to climate policy to how your next paycheck gets taxed. He doesn't run a government. He doesn't run a corporation. He runs a conversation. And through that conversation, he's brought presidents, prime ministers, CEOs, and central bankers to the same snowy stage in Switzerland for over 50 years. From Cold War negotiations to pandemic policies, from climate pledges to AI ethics, his fingerprints are everywhere, without leaving any on the money. Officially, he owns nothing like the billionaires he convenes. But influence you can't measure in dollars, because it moves dollars. His name is Klaus Schwab, and his invention, the World Economic Forum, isn't just a meeting, it's a marketplace of power. This is the story of the most powerful man in finance who never even ran a bank. And it starts in a Europe still burning from war. Germany, 1938. The world is on fire, though the match has barely been struck. In a small town called Ravensburg, near the shores of Lake Constance, a boy named Klaus Schwab is born into a country unraveling. Factories hum under the shadow of swastikas. Ravensburg itself is spared from heavy bombing, but the war touches everything. Food is rationed, fear is routine. And in the Schwab household, engineering runs deep. His father manages a Swiss-owned industrial company. It builds turbines, machines for energy and infrastructure. But during the war, it also manufactured components for the German military. Young Klaus grows up with a view most children will never see. The factory floor, steel, power, precision, the language of machines. But outside, the language is ideology, and it's tearing Europe apart. When the war ends, Germany is rubble. Cities flattened, millions dead. The country doesn't just need rebuilding, it needs rethinking. And for Klaus Schwab, that becomes a lifelong obsession. How do you build systems that don't collapse into chaos? He's a teenager when the Marshall Plan arrives. He sees foreign aid turn ruins into roads. He sees cooperation, not conquest, start to work. And he absorbs a lesson that will define his career. Power isn't just who holds the gun, it's who sets the rules. In the 1960s, while Europe rebuilt and America raced to the moon, Schwab was building something else, a blueprint. He earns a doctorate in engineering from ETH Zurich, one of Europe's most elite technical universities. He studies systems, mechanical, industrial, and human, how to make them efficient, how to make them last. But he isn't satisfied with machines. He wants to understand markets. So he adds a second doctorate, this time in economics at the University of Freiburg. Then, still restless, he crosses the Atlantic. At Harvard's Kennedy School, Schwab studies public administration under the era's most powerful thinkers, people who believe that capitalism isn't fixed, that policy can be engineered like a turbine. Among his mentors, Henry Kissinger, the man who will soon rewrite geopolitics from Washington. By the late 60s, Schwab is armed with three disciplines: engineering, economics, and governance. He could join the industry, he could enter politics, but instead, he chooses a harder path to build a space where they all collide. A platform where CEOs, presidents, academics, and activists could speak in the same room before they collide in the real world. And in 1971, that vision found its stage in a small Swiss resort town called Davos. It's February 1971. The Cold War divides the world in two. The Vietnam War rages. Inflation is creeping up. Most people are focused on survival, not sustainability. And yet, in a remote alpine village in Switzerland, 450 business executives and academics gather for something no one quite understands yet, a meeting called the European Management Symposium. Its organizer, Klaus Schwab, a man with no fortune, no political office, and no famous name. He arrives with an idea that sounds radical for the time. What if companies didn't just answer to shareholders? What if they served all stakeholders, employees, customers, communities, and yes, even the planet. This becomes the first Davos Manifesto, a document that challenges the pure profit model of capitalism. It argues for corporate responsibility decades before ESG, before sustainability became a buzzword. The meeting is small, modest, but something about it works. The neutral Swiss setting, the timing, the sense that the rules of business need rewriting. Schwab doesn't give speeches like a politician. He frames questions, and he listens. That's his power, creating a stage where power talks to itself. What starts as a one-off symposium becomes an annual pilgrimage. By the late 70s, it's not just European CEOs showing up. It's government ministers, economists, and slowly, even presidents. Davos is no longer a place. It's an idea. And it's about to get a new name, the World Economic Forum. By the mid-1980s, the snow in Davos wasn't just crunching under the boots of CEOs anymore. Heads of states are arriving, cabinet ministers, finance chiefs, because this isn't just a conference anymore. It's a crossroads. Schwab sees the shift, and in 1987, he makes it official. The European Management Symposium is rebranded as the World Economic Forum. The mission? To improve the state of the world. The method? Convening the most powerful people that exist. It doesn't take long for Davos to start shaping history. In 1988, Greece and Turkey, two NATO allies on the brink of war, sent delegations to Switzerland. Tensions are high, diplomats brace for failure, but at Davos, something happens. Over late-night conversations, an agreement is struck. The crisis cools. The press calls it the Davos Declaration. It won't be the last time the mountains host more than polite speeches. In 1992, the Cold War is over, but South Africa teeters on a knife's edge. Apartheid is collapsing, violence is surging, and at Davos, three men meet: Nelson Mandela, F.W. de Klerk, and Mangosuthu Buthelezi. They talk, they shake hands. Weeks later, the peace process accelerates. Then comes China. In 1979, Schwab invited a small delegation from Beijing, the first of its kind to an event dominated by the West. By the 1990s, Chinese officials were regulars. Davos becomes the stage where a rising superpower tests its voice. And in the late 90s, as Asia reels from financial crisis, Schwab helps broker the conversations that will lead to something even bigger: the G20. Not bad for a man whose job title, technically, is founder and executive chairman. But this is where the paradox sharpens. Klaus Schwab doesn't run a government. He doesn't print money. He doesn't command armies. Yet in a world where access is everything, he controls the guest list. And at Davos, that's the ultimate currency. By the 2000s, Davos is no longer a networking event. It's the control room of globalization. CEOs announce mergers here before they tell shareholders. Presidents use the stage to float policies before they reach parliaments. Even Bono shows up, pitching debt relief to billionaires in the same breath as rock lyrics. And through it all, Klaus Schwab keeps repeating the same idea he wrote in 1971. Capitalism must serve more than shareholders. He calls it stakeholder capitalism, a model where business carries moral obligations, not just quarterly targets. For decades, it sounded idealistic. But after the 2008 financial crisis, it starts to sound like a lifeline. Then, Schwab shifts the conversation again. In 2016, at Davos, he unveils a phrase that will dominate think tanks and policy boards: the Fourth Industrial Revolution. A world where AI, robotics, and biotechnology fuse the physical, digital, and biological. Schwab warns, if we don't govern this revolution, it will govern us. But the real inflection point comes in 2020. A virus halts the planet, markets collapse, governments scramble, and from his perch in Davos, Schwab steps forward with an idea and a warning. We need a great reset of capitalism, he declares, flanked by Prince Charles on a virtual stage. The proposal? Green infrastructure, social safety nets, a rewiring of markets for sustainability and resilience. To some, it sounds like responsible leadership. to others like central planning in disguise. Almost overnight, the Great Reset becomes a Rorschach test for global trust. World leaders quote it, CEOs pledge allegiance to it, conspiracy theorists weaponize it. Schwab goes from being a quiet academic to a meme, a symbol of everything people fear about global elites. Through it all, he stays calm, smiling in that unshakable Swiss way. Because for Schwab, controversy isn't a threat. It's proof that the conversation he started 50 years ago still matters, and it's only getting bigger. For decades, Davos marketed itself as a neutral ground, a place for dialogue, not deals. But the higher it climbed, the harder the questions became. Critics point to the optics first. Private jets lining up at Swiss airfields for a week of panels on climate change. Lavish dinners while half the planet struggles with inflation. It looks like hypocrisy because, oftentimes, it is. Then there's the money. The World Economic Forum is a non-profit, but its partnership comes with price tags in the hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars. Corporate members pay to join the conversation. Does that buy influence? Schwab says no. Skeptics aren't convinced. And Schwab himself? His salary is a closely guarded number. WEF filings suggest a few million per year, but exact figures remain murky. Add the fact that the forum is a private foundation under Swiss law, meaning little public disclosure and the secrecy feeds speculation. Then came the pandemic. The Great Reset was meant as a framework for post-crisis rebuilding. Instead, it became a lightning rod. Conspiracy theories exploded across social media. Schwab was cast as an architect of global control, a man pulling strings behind lockdowns, digital IDs, and vaccine mandates. None of it proven, all of it viral. Ironically, the truth is less dramatic and more complicated. Klaus Schwab isn't a billionaire. He doesn't own the banks. He doesn't run a state. What he runs is access. And in the 21st century, that might just be more powerful than money. In April 2025, Klaus Schwab stepped back. After more than a century at the helm, the architect of Davos hands over the title of executive chair to Peter Brabeck-Letmathe, former CEO of Nestle. The move is framed as renewal. But the truth is, succession at the World Economic Forum isn't just a staffing change. It's a shift in the center of gravity. For decades, Schwab has been the constant. Presidents came and went. Markets rose and crashed. The Berlin Wall fell, the euro was born, the Great Recession burned through balance sheets. And through it all, one man sent the invitations. One man set the theme. One man decided who got a seat at the table. Now, that man is stepping into the shadows. His Global Shapers Network, thousands of young leaders groomed through WEF programs, was meant to future-proof his mission. But will it hold? Without Schwab, does Davos stay Davos? Or does it become just another conference with glossy panels and no real power? And then there's the bigger question. What happens to the vision Schwab spent his life defending? Stakeholder capitalism, the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. These aren't just slogans, they're blueprints. One's critiques called dangerous and admirers called necessary. The handover marks the end of an era, but not the end of the debate. Because if Klaus Schwab taught the world anything, it's that power isn't always loud. Sometimes it wears a tie, smiles politely, and waits for you to come to Davos. This is Bedlam Bear. And if you want to understand the next name shaping money, markets, and the future, subscribe. The next story is already waiting.